Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
Welcome to Mortification of Spin. My name's Carl Trueman. I'm a professor at Grove City College in Western Pennsylvania, and I'm here as always with my colleague, friend, longtime sidekick, Todd Pruitt, a PCA pastor in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Good to see you, Todd.
Good to see you, Carl. Good to be in your presence. I hope you're doing well. Our listeners won't know this, but even your wife is here with us, the lovely Katrina, my fellow Scots person. Katrina and I, every once in a while, we reminisce over our homeland. And Katrina, good to see you. I'll always be confused as to why you would marry an Englishman, given that you bear noble Scottish blood in your veins, but that's all right.
That's actually a good segue to our guest, do you believe? Because like all Americans, you claim, of course, to be descended from a famous European ancestor. It's amazing that no Americans are descended from completely nondescript Europeans.
There are plenty of nondescript people in my family line, but I've got this, what you're alluding to, I've got it locked down.
Yeah.
It is locked down.
Well, it's going to shock our guest because our guest today is Fran Maier. I got to know Fran in Philadelphia when I was teaching at a seminary there. Fran, it was at that time working as the assistant to Archbishop Charles Chaput. And I got to know Fran through some seminars that the Archbishop would run, and we'd become friends. And I would say, Fran is not just a friend, but also a mentor. And he's no fan of your ancestor, Todd, because your ancestor that you claim is, of course, John Knox, the famous Scottish reformer. So, Fran, delighted to have you on the program today. We're the great grandson of your hero, John Knox.
It was wonderful to be in Scotland this past September because as you know, I was at the castle where the cardinal got thrown over the side. So it was an extremely interesting experience.
Bloody beaten, of course. Cardinal beaten, yes. So, well, Fran, it's great to have you with us. For those who don't know Fran, he was, before he worked for the Archbishop, he was also, I think you were editor of the National Catholic Register, Fran, is that correct?
15 years, yeah.
Yeah, and before that, you were a Hollywood screenwriter. So Fran is a man of many, many talents. And one of the things he's most known for today is he's a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and writes some wonderful commentary on religious and cultural issues. And we've invited him on today to speak about somebody who's been particularly influential on him and somebody that we think our listeners would benefit from reading, and that is Neil Postman. Fran, can you tell us a little bit about Neil Postman to bring up to speed any of our listeners who may not be familiar with his name?
Yeah, well, Postman, author obviously, and also a media scholar working out of New York, and the books that he's written have been tremendously influential, I think, on people like us. His critique of technology, I think, is very, very powerful, especially because he was a very good writer and speaker and very accessible to just ordinary people who were trying to figure out what was happening in the culture. I first encountered him with his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, on television primarily. And of course, my background, my undergrad and grad formation was in film and television production, so I had an interest in that. I think it's a brilliant book, but the book that really affected me was his book Technopoly, which was a long-term analysis of what technology and the addiction to it is doing to the shape and nature of our culture. And then there were some wonderful essays that he wrote as well. I mean, there's There's a fun essay on the religious dynamic of American advertising called The Parable of the Ring Around the Collar, which I really recommend. And another one, Social Science as Moral Philosophy, which is a critique of the addiction to social science in the culture. So, I mean, he was an amazingly talented man, not a Christian, but so much of his work is easily transferable to a kind of a Christian framework of looking at the world. So he has great transferability. And I really recommend people to become familiar with his work because, particularly Christians, because they'll draw a lot of good from it.
One of the things you address in a recent article is this tension between, on the one hand, a desire we have, there's a certain there are certain benefits to if you like, a democratization of access to information. We don't want some central office, telling us what we can and can't have access to information-wise. And yet, like a lot of good things, it comes with a price tag, though, doesn't it?
Yes, the image that I use is hornets in the head. Mm-hmm. The internet never stops, so those hornets are always stinging. And a good example of it is the election of, Pope Leo XIV just the last few days ago in the Catholic world. I mean, there has been a tsunami of interpretive opinion that I don't even want to hear about it anymore.
Right.
And I do this for a living. I mean, it's demoralizing and exhausting, and it makes you want to withdraw, which of course is very unhealthy for the culture because a democracy depends upon the mature and engaged involvement of adults who think clearly. If you can't think clearly, sooner or later you withdraw, and that leaves the ground to people who may be badly motivated. Yeah. I think the noise level, Todd, in the culture is just unbearable.
Yeah.
I don't know how young people are going to grow up in a healthy state because right. I was formed in a typographic culture, so I can listen to this stuff and deal with it, or play a video game, for example, which I've done for 40 years, but it doesn't affect me the same way that it affects young people. Right. And I think that anxiety was something that Postman really understood, and it made him very uneasy.
Yeah. Yeah, the downplaying of we've just had a guest on in an earlier recording talking about the disembodiment that modern technology encourages. Could does Postman speak to that at all?
Well, I think he does, Carl, in his book, The End of Education. I'm not sure he uses that language, but the end of education is about, okay, what is the purpose of education? Well, it's the creation of mature, adult, well-rounded people. And he targets the computer, for example, as something that has potentially very negative psychic impact on young people. And he wrote this book more than 20 years ago. I mean, it's an older book. So he, again, I mean, education is supposed to result in adult, mature people who know how to engage with one another without killing each other or withdrawing from the field completely. And the computer and related technologies just seem to bring a lot of positives. And of course, on one level they do, but they also have a fracturing impact on people's psychic stability and on the psychic stability of a culture.
Mm-hmm. I read Technopoly.
The thing that I wrote that you were referencing, I think the column was In the Kingdom of Noise.
Yes.
And I specifically used, I think, the example of, C.S. Lewis talked about the music of hell is noise.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that we're creating. And we're doing it without thinking clearly about the consequences of our actions. In fact, I think in that column I referenced my first conversation with Neil Postman, which was I was blathering about how this is terrific, everyone's going to have a voice in the formation of the culture, we'll be flattening the command structure, authority structure of the culture. And he listened to me for about 20 minutes and then said, well, that might not be the consequences that are going to result from this thing. And then he went into his critique about how noise demoralizes people and alienates them from being engaged in a culture because they just can't handle the constant instability.
I mean, let's revisit the words of the great Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so busy trying to figure out if they could, they never asked whether or not they should. But it is a good question. And I read Technopoly in the mid-'90s when I was a seminary student. And in reading your article the other day and seeing that you referenced it, I thought, goodness, the things that he warns about, the world has changed so radically in just those couple of decades. I can't imagine how he would critique some of the problems now. So you mention in your article that kind of this connection or a way in which, for instance, social media can stoke resentment and anger. One of your comments is anger is by nature corrosive. And one of the things I've seen as a pastor, well, and just as general observer, is how all of the online information that we're bombarded with, combined with social media, our ability to then chime in, makes everybody so angry.
Yeah, I'm sorry to laugh, but Carl's heard me say this before. I mean, I'm angry almost all the time, and most of the people I know are angry at least part of the time.
Yeah.
And not because, I mean, obviously there are legitimate reasons to be angry about certain things.
Sure.
Jesus himself, expresses that in the Scripture. But it's just this constant abrading impact of technology and information, particularly that is impossible to absorb without becoming frustrated.
Right.
It leads to anger, then it leads to exhaustion. That exhaustion leads to despair,
Right.
And withdrawal. It's not a healthy thing. So you have to develop the ability to turn it off, which obviously most people, including myself, have a problem with.
So I'd like your thought on this. In evangelical circles, just within the last week, there was big news that came out of a situation, and really it's within the broader camp of conservative, kind of Calvinistic-y evangelicals, Calvinistic-y Baptists and whatnot. So very conservative, doctrinally conservative evangelicals. And there's a ministry called G3, and they host what has grown into a very large conference every year, as well as producing online content. Well, their president just had to, this past week, just had to resign in disgrace because it was revealed that he was running at least 4 different anonymous X accounts where he was just pouring out invective and trashing his own colleagues within his own camp, as well as some of the speakers at the conference for the ministry that he was a president of.
Yeah.
Just a great deal of anger and mockery and outright slander going on. My question is, has social media and information technology and the rush of information, does it make that, or is it just a symptom of it?
No, I think it makes it. Well, actually, it's both. But I mean, I would emphasize that it helps to make it because it empowers people to be stupid and aggressive online
Right.
in a way that they could never get away with if
Right.
they were in the presence of the other person.
Yeah.
And of course, when people tribalize themselves into groups that are talking about an issue, that accelerates the process. It has an exponential effect on things. So, I have an X account, but I rarely use it. And I even rarely use Facebook, which really dates me now. But
Yeah.
I try to avoid it because it just only stokes my irritation. Can I make one other point too here that really interests me? He wrote a book called "Building a Bridge to the 18th Century: How the Past Can Improve Our Future." Now, I'm a big fan of using the past as an instructive tool for people dealing with the tensions and frustrations we're going through right now. I mean, Carl's heard me say this before, that I think we're living through a new kind of reformation. Not obviously the differences are enormous in terms of the historical circumstances, but the underlying dynamic of how we look at the world, how we organize society, how we understand our own humanity. Those are similar things, a profound cultural revolution. Now, to get back to Postman, he wrote this book about building a bridge to the 18th century. But I read it and I thought, this guy's saying we should go back to the Enlightenment,
Yeah.
And I think the Enlightenment is part of the problem here, not part of the solution. He was a secular Jew. He didn't have any religious convictions. And he just thought that, the Enlightenment got it right, but we screwed it up afterwards. I think that's wrong. I think the Enlightenment had certain principles in it that naturally result in the kind of mess that we're in now. And I'm not the only one who's written about that. I mean, it's other folks have made the same observation.
Yeah, I think.
So he had his weak spots.
Yeah, the problem I think with the Enlightenment is its anthropology, really. It has a far too optimistic view of human nature as currently constituted.
Yeah, I think in that regard that to oversimplify it, I think they basically liked biblical morality but didn't want the God baggage.
Right.
And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
That was
if you pull him out of the deal, the whole thing collapses.
Yeah, Nietzsche's Madman points that out in The Gay Science. And I've always thought it's interesting, Nietzsche's Madman, of course, nobody takes him seriously. And the madman sort of falls silent and then says, I've come too early. Well, I think we're living at the hour of the madman now. Now is the madman's time. Yeah, he was 120, 130 years too soon. But now, partly thanks to the technology we have, we are living in the hour of the madman. And I would add to the comment about, technology creates some of these problems. I think social media actually incentivizes bad behavior.
Right.
It's a little bit like nobody's going to watch a soap opera on the TV to see, couples getting on well and remaining faithful to each other. You've got to have that infidelity subplot somewhere to make it interesting. And I think social media incentivizes behavior. I'm reminded of that comment of Martin Luther in 1528 when Luther says, we gave the people the gospel and they behaved like irrational swine. And I'd say, we gave people the internet and they behave like irrational swine.
I had never heard that before. It's a fabulous quote.
I can send you the reference. It's actually from his preface to the Small Catechism. When I get back home, Fran, I will send you that. But here to push you out of your comfort zone.
We're going to ask him to become a Presbyterian?
That would really push him out of his comfort zone. I think, what sort of strategies would you suggest for combating this? Now, obviously, it's, we're not taking over Congress for Jesus anytime soon. We're not going to be solving it at a national level. This has to be a grassroots, pardon the expression, a grassroots reformation. What sort of personal disciplines would you recommend, Fran, to people who want to, I'll put it this way, master technology rather than be mastered by it?
Well, there's all sorts of, you have to have the kind of character that can build some internal self-discipline, obviously. I mean, technology fasts are a great idea if you can actually do them. But even, it's like saying, I'm only going to drink one drink a day. Well, that, if you have a strong will, you can make that happen, but that can metastasize pretty quickly. So you're in a situation where you're just constantly swallowed by this envelope of noise and technology. The only thing that you can do is unplug it, and I don't know how many people are capable of that, which leads to the next comment that I want to make. I don't think big programs are going to work here. In the Catholic world, I'm assuming a continuing bleeding out for the next, I don't know how many years. I think the focus has to be on, because the culture has made people tepid in terms of their religious belief. We experience our religion, so many Americans, not just Catholics, but Americans in general, who are religious, tend to experience it as, a cultural inheritance or a good system of ethics, or a good guide to moral behavior. And Christianity ultimately is much, much more than that and more demanding than that. It has a supernatural core that Americans who are fundamentally pragmatic tend to lose over time. So to get to back to your question, if you can develop the disciplines to unplug and read, for example, that's a powerful tool, I think you'll begin getting your sanity back. But I think we need to stop thinking in terms of, Americans think in terms of programs and plans and organizations, and I don't have much confidence in that. I think that the individual has to take responsibility for his or her behavior, and focusing on the conversion of the individual, starting with oneself, I really do believe is the beginning of a revolution. So in my case, for example, what's my problem? Well, I thought I had a problem with, pride or a bunch of other things, and Sue said, "You're out of your mind. You've got an anger problem." And that's when I realized, that's my core problem. So how do I try to deal with that? Well, in the Catholic environment, adoration is a significant thing. Just being alone with the Lord and the sacrament for an hour a week, or half an hour a week, and then just reading Scripture, even 15 minutes a day. And that silence, having that personal relationship with Him, begins a change. But the heart of the matter here is that until people understand that they have the personal responsibility of reform and conversion, and working on oneself, changing oneself, there isn't going to be any change in the culture. And if it's only a small core who do that, well, that's the beginning of a regeneration. So I'm thinking in much longer terms than, how do we shut off the spigot?
And it's disorienting. I mean, I love the idea of kind of social media, certain technological fasts, and what I found is, it can be very disorienting. So one of the things I noticed recently is I needed to start putting my iPhone in a different room when I sat down to read. Because this just reflexive need almost to keep checking it and interrupting my reading. And I thought, this is one of the ways that, again, technology is not neutral. And, in this article I referenced just a minute ago, you refer to C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, and you mention a scene that I've actually used as an illustration from the pulpit, where the bus of the condemned, they go, they're let out of heaven, and they just don't like it. Even the grass feels bad, under their feet. Everything is so alien to them. And when I was reading that in your article, I thought, that's sort of the way it feels when you step away from some of these things that we've become dependent on almost emotionally.
I remember that image. I wish C.S. Lewis could be cloned.
Yes.
Because actually, Postman had some of C.S. Lewis's skill. If you look at Tolkien and you look at C.S. Lewis, who is the better writer? Well, I think the more accessible writer actually was C.S. Lewis. I love Tolkien. I've quoted him 100 million times. But Lewis had this wonderful, transparent ability to be an excellent apologist and accessible at the same time. It was really powerful. So I wish, unfortunately that's immoral, so we can't do that. But Postman had a little bit of that, and that accessibility really makes him a delight to read.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this is a discussion that covers themes that Carl and I are fascinated in. That's why it comes up periodically in our own discussions. And the intersection of technology and our lives, particularly for Christians to be thinking about this, is more and more Christians I find are asking these questions and looking for guidance because they see the way that certain modern technologies have impacted their life. Again, we're thankful for the ways that certain technologies have blessed us, but they almost always come with a price tag as well. And so this is a good discussion. It's one that we want to continue to have. Christians need to think very critically about technology and how we use it, what it does to us. Is this stoking anger in me? Am I dehumanizing my neighbor through things like social media and that sort of thing? This is a matter of our discipleship, and we want to take it seriously. So thanks to our guest, Fran Maier, who is the Senior Fellow at Ethics and Public Policy Center, and a writer who is always worth reading. I read him regularly, and I'm always challenged. My thoughts are always provoked in very good and positive ways, and we're very thankful that he took some time to be with us. You may make a final point, of course. So am I going to tell you no? Of course not.
No, but just as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking we're all going to be made accountable for our time. At some point, we're going to meet God, and He's going to ask us, how did you use the life that I gave you? And so we need to think about our time and how we use it in a Christian and stewardship type way. And that really is, I think, the heart of my anxiety about technology, because I've spent hours, just floating around YouTube without any sense of time, and it's very dangerous, I think. Anyway, I'm sorry.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that really, when you think about it, when I talk to younger people, well, not just younger people my age in their 50s, the time commitment is extraordinary, and I don't think most people realize how many hours they spend on that. And that's, again, it's a matter of discipleship.
I spent about 20 minutes yesterday on Kerguelen Island. Just hey, that looks pretty good. I'll watch that for 20 minutes. I had no idea, but that's the kind of thing that you need to be alert against.
Yeah. Well, I watched a video the other day on a man's 30-year-old terrarium. So there you go. Anyway, I'm not making that up. So anyway, well, listen, to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for the time you take to listen to Mortification of Spin. We would encourage you to go to our website, mortificationofspin.org, and you can enter to win a copy of the book that our guest, Fran Maier, has written about and helped us benefit from. Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. It is a classic. I remember reading it the first time when I was in seminary and being very challenged by it. As Fran told us earlier, Postman was not a Christian man. He was not a religious man. But he wrote things, he critiqued certain things in culture that did then and still do resonate appropriately so with Christians. And so you can go to our website and enter to win a copy of Postman's classic book. And while you're there, if you'd like to make a donation to the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals so that they can continue to provide good content, then you certainly could do that, and we certainly would appreciate that. Until then, we're so grateful for you joining us, and we look forward to being with you next time on Mortification of Spin.
Are we not men? We are evil. Are we not men? EVO. Are we not kids? We are Evo.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.